Hey church, the Tribune Project, as most of you know, is our attempt to reclaim and renovate a building in the heart of downtown South Bend. It's the printing press building of the South Bend Tribune, and that'll be a future home, not just for us as a church, but a place for the people of South Bend where common good can happen all week long. And we are overdue for an update. So let's talk a little bit about where we've been on the project and where we are right now. Last fall, we told you that the cost of phase one, which is us renovating enough of the building to get in there and begin to live our life there. The cost of phase one had escalated dramatically over the summer. Some of that was due to inflation and supply chain issues, and some of that was because there are parts of the building that we don't plan on renovating in phase one, but it turns out we still should probably do the demolition of those parts of the building in phase one, because if we wait for later phases, that demolition gets more expensive due to some of the modifications in the building. So moving demolition to phase one saves money over the lifetime of the project, but it means it's more expensive to get up there, get in there right up front. So we told you about that, and we said, frankly, we've got a financial gap that we've got to figure out how to cover. When we looked at the mortgage amount that we've been approved for, that we think is prudent, and that sets us up for a mortgage payment that's more affordable than our current rent payment, and we looked at the money that we as a community have committed through capital giving over a couple of years, it just didn't add up. So we got to work to close the financial gap, and the good news is we did. So one thing we did is we retooled phase one with our architect and contractor. We reduced some of the scope of that phase one effort in the building. But the good news here is we still end up with roughly the same amount of square footage there to use in phase one as we have right here at Studebaker 112. And some of that space is going to be actually better and more functional. So for example, the kids' rooms are going to be in their own secure hallway, a little more removed from everything else going on, which is better for them and a little bit better for sound. So that's great. Also, because we need to make sure the front entrance of the building is accessible and safe for everyone, we're going to go ahead and create that courtyard experience outside. So we're going to have beautiful space to take advantage of during the summers. So that's the reduced scope, phase one, still super useful for us. And the other way that we close that financial gap is that some of you actually came through with new commitments or expanded financial commitments, kicked in more cash on the project. So thank you if that's you. You helped make this possible. And today the financial gap is totally covered. Between the mortgage amount and the money that we've given and committed, we've got everything that we need to do to accomplish phase one. But now we have a timeline gap. This is the other trick about this. So if today we signed the construction contract, we would probably be moving in September or October, sometime this fall. However, our giving commitments that are helping fund this project go through April of 2024. So if we move in September or October, at which point everything's due on the project, we've got to pay the contractor for everything, but we're still giving toward that financial number through April 2024, we've got a calendar gap of something like 6 months. So we started pursuing a bridge loan. This would be a short-term interest-only loan that we would take out to cover that gap, and we would have it paid in full by the time that our financial commitments are paid up in April 2024. We're working with the same bank that has worked with us on the mortgage for the building, and we heard in December and early January that they felt that the bridge loan was promising. And then we waited to hear more, and we waited to hear more. And then after waiting for a while, we found out that our banker was leaving that bank to go to another bank, which meant that our loan process for the bridge loan has to start over with a new banker. So there's a bit of a pause there while we're waiting for that to get worked out again. We're still hopeful, but until we get approved on that bridge loan, we don't know if we'll have it. All of this kind of financial stuff is overseen by our board, and they, I think very wisely, have said we just can't sign the construction contract merely hoping that we figure out how to cover that calendar gap. We've got to have a plan clearly in place for how we're going to do that before we make this commitment to the contractor. So we're waiting to sign the construction contract until we figure out that rough 6-month gap of a dollar amount of roughly $500,000. Now, also we want to make sure that you know that if you've got an alternative solution for that gap, we would love to hear from you. We know that there are people out there with means and resources or with other tools available to help us think about that. Let us know. I'll say more at the end of this about how you can reach out to us. In the meantime, you might also be wondering about what happens between the end of our lease here and our move-in date, because our lease ends here in June, and even if we could pull the trigger and get the construction going right away, we still got a few months to cover between the end of our lease and our move-in. We started exploring around town and also continuing to check in on the state of things right here at Studebaker. And it turns out that actually the best option that we might have is to stay right here in a limited capacity. A little while ago, we reached out to stakeholders. That's volunteers, financial supporters, anybody who helps make South Bend City Church possible in a real way. And we sent you a survey and we asked you what's most important to you about that transitional period. And one thing that we heard loud and clear from a lot of you is that regular weekly gatherings really matters. Finding some way to keep that rhythm going regardless of where we call home. And it turns out that we might be able to stay right here in a limited scope month-to-month lease where we would have temporary use on Sundays of this room, maybe Thursday nights for band rehearsals, and then during the week the space would be used by another tenant. The other good news about that, besides being able to meet weekly right here at Studebaker, is that for those months in between, we'd be paying a reduced rate here of something a little less than a third of our current rent payment here at Studebaker. So that seems like a really frugal way for us to move through that period. We have a verbal commitment on that, and we hope to have a contract on that month-to-month extension any day now. That's a lot of information, I know. If you have any questions about this, of course, we'd love to hear from you. You can just email info@southbendcitychurch.com. And if you have any possibilities or wisdom or resources to help us think about that gap of $500,000 for 6 months, we'd love to hear from you too. Just reach out and we'll work together. Thanks.